I also just wanted to say, you know, during the registration, when folks were signing up for this symposium, we received probably in the order of 500 or so questions and comments for today and yesterday, as well as tomorrow. So these 3 days of this symposium. Additionally, you know, we've received probably on the order of, you know, maybe 100 or so questions from folks over the course of the day. So we really appreciate your involvement and your interest and attention to the speakers, and you know, hopefully we can provide a little additional clarity today. So first, I'd like to introduce back to the stage. We have, I'm just gonna go with first names. So we have Adil, Barbara, and Jason. All their information is on the bio sheet, so I won't go through the introductions. And that will lead us to our questions. All right, so this question is for Adil. So are the definitions of adaptive design trials standardized across all health authorities?
Not quite sure. I guess this was addressed at the last slide of my presentation, where it was stated that currently there is no full harmonization between some regulators, BERTA, ICH.
Next, for Barbara. So the questioner sees sites, especially in the USA, restricting sponsors to conduct on-site monitoring, which allows only once or twice a year on-site visits. How can sponsors comply with their monitoring plans? And can you address challenges to identify non-compliance or issues at the site level, which may require on-site review? For example, IP accountability, missing safety points like adverse events and serious adverse events, et cetera. There's a huge risk for trials with new technologies, novel trials, and early stage trials. And before Barbara answers, I'll just say this was a common question that I saw on a few different sessions. So I think everyone will appreciate Barbara's response.
Yeah, I think we got this question several times from this session. It is a problem, right? To be able to monitor a trial, you have to be able to access the information. And while remote monitoring performs, it can be used to perform a lot of the oversight, there are some things that still need to be done in person, right? So how are you going to assure that the pharmacy and the drug accountability is going to be handled appropriately if you don't have access to see the pharmacy and the storage conditions of the investigational product? If you aren't able to see the equipment and the facilities, how can you determine that they're fit for the trial? So particularly in the site selection process, it's going to be important to be able to look at the systems, look at the equipment, look at the facilities, and determine that they're adequate to meet the requirements of the trial. So if the facility is going to restrict access, there are ways to work around that part of the time, but a complete ban in on-site activities is going to be impractical for most trials, I believe. It depends, right? We're saying that all the time. It depends on the trial, it depends on the data that's being collected, how it's being collected, where it's being stored. But I think for your typical trial, there are going to be some things that have to be done in person, on-site, at least initially, and possibly at the close of the trial. So I think it's a very important part of the site selection criteria for each of the sites that are engaged in the trial. And then at that point, after site selection, it becomes probably less critical that you're actually able to be on site for all of the oversight activities. So if you're in a situation where you had authority to go on site and visit the facility to perform monitoring, and that permission was lifted from you, or you were restricted from going to the site sometime during the course of the trial, I think the best thing to do is to kind of work with the site and first verify, are there any conditions that we can meet that would satisfy the concerns that you have? So during the pandemic, our international inspection team was doing a lot of inspections in facilities in person. And there was a lot of back and forth in our pre-announcement for those inspections with the facilities, talking about what special provisions or controls would you like us to meet in order to come on site and look at the data. So whether it was providing a negative test for our inspector before they arrived on site, if it meant that we were going to be working in a large conference room with the data broadcast on a screen, as opposed to sitting side by side looking at laptop computers in order to get that social distancing in, right? So we can do that. If you want us to tour the facilities after patient care hours, we can do that. We don't have to be in the clinic exposing patients, to additional risk. We can wait until after hours to verify that the equipment and the facilities meet needs for the trial. But let's work on what we can do, what restrictions you would like to work within in order to reduce the risk to your patient population, but still meet the needs of the trial. So again, I think part of it is a negotiation with the site, I guess, when you're setting up your sites, and when the situation changes over the course of the study, do what you can to work that out, and just make sure that you're meeting the needs of the study, verifying the data that has to be verified. And you can work with them for as much of that can be done remotely as possible. And I just want to see if Jason has anything to add to that from their experience.
I'd earmark this one as a question for the next session, actually, but I'll pick it up now. In the UK, there's something called the Model Clinical Trial Agreement, which investigator sites and sponsors are required, encouraged, in inverted commas, to use. And in there's a requirement to permit that. So I took a quick image of the wording, but it says the trial site shall permit the monitor and any auditor or inspector access to all relevant data of the participants for monitoring. Such access to be on site or via remote means be arranged at mutually convenient times and on reasonable notice. The reason for bringing it up is, in essence, it's in a contract at the beginning. So a good place to start, much as you don't necessarily want to jeopardize the relationship with the site, is there is a contract in place and there is a requirement to be able to go on site and do this, and particularly in response to the question here, where there are potential compliance issues and this kind of thing. That would start to worry me if somebody's saying, you can't come. I'm not going to let you on site. Well, all right, okay, but let's understand why that is. Is there a real need to do so because something's going on at the site? You're up to the eyeballs in COVID patients and everything's locked down and this kind of thing. Or is it more that actually something's happened and you don't want me there for whatever reason it is, and you're just going to hope that I'm going to trust your data and I can make life more convenient by you not coming. So I do think it comes back to, how are you working with the site? Is there a reason for you to go? And if there is, then fine. Have you exhausted all of your other methods for working with them? So there's a finite amount you can do by remote monitoring of records and this kind of thing. But if it's for cause, and if it's these records which you can't easily get to in other ways, or in some respects, even if it's just to go and kick the tires a little bit, because we know that you can see different things if you're there in person versus whether it's just sitting at home looking at your big screen. And ultimately, if the output is you still can't come, we're not going to let you on site, we're not going to give you access to anything, then that's when you start to need that harder conversation of, well, if not, why not? And are you still a site for us as a sponsor? As an inspector, I have the ability to demand, inverted commas, that you allow me on site. But as an auditor, as a monitor, you don't necessarily have the same. You end up having to use that power of, well, perhaps we don't want you as a site anymore, so perhaps we'll pause your recruitment while we get to a point where you can let me come, or perhaps we don't allow further studies. But I also think it comes back to your site selection. I think you need to be really clear about when and where you do remote monitoring, or when you do on-site versus remote monitoring, and the same with audits. And that way it's harder for the site to say no. But I understand the burden for investigators and their staff, and these days they're ever busier in terms of how they're working, what they need to work with. So it's the right balance. And if you use the hammer at the beginning, then you're not going to end up with a good relationship, and that relationship is important.
I did want to ask that one thing that may not be considered in some of these is involvement of the institution in the site selection. So it's maybe the investigator making that decision that you can't come on site, but it could also be the institution. So it may be that there's a need to involve the institution in that negotiation during that site selection process. So just anything else to add? Adam?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. You have a lot of knowledge and experience at the table here, so we appreciate your insights on that. So Jason, I'm going to go back to you. What are the expectations for a risk-based audit plan in relation to specific clinical trial projects? So more specifically, which types of audits, for example, investigator site audits, TMF, CSR audits, clinical database audits, should the sponsor foresee, and how many should they, expect to be requested? And what are the key variables included in these types of evaluations?
The temptation to give a hard number and say that's how many you should do. It's important to understand what the trial is and what you're trying to do with the trial. What are your key data points? What do you need to ensure to protect the trial participants, to ensure data integrity, all of these kind of things. And it's that which guides the audits you need to do. And equally, how many audits you need to do. You do the first audit and it throws out some issues. So perhaps you go and do some more, you follow your nose a little bit. If you start to assign, we only do these audits and we only do this finite number of things, then does that fully allow you to explore the issues which may be associated with that trial? So I can't give you a number and I can't really tell you exactly what you need to go and look at. It will depend on a trial by trial basis. I don't know if anybody else wants to add to that.
Thank you. So we have a little over 2 minutes and we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. So I have one for Adil. This may have been on your slide. So with respect to sponsor oversight, you had on a slide that committees recruited should have SOPs. Does this apply to third-party vendors and service providers as well? And if so, could this be addressed via a contract?
Thank you. Now, when we talk about tasks that third-party vendors are conducting, what's important here is that the tasks are laid out in a written document. That's very important. It doesn't have to be an SOP per se, as long as these tasks are laid out in detail in a written document. I'll give you an example. So if I'm conducting an inspection, I find there is a contract between the sponsor and a third party. I want to see what the third party is doing, and whatever they're doing, if it's laid out in detail in a document, then I'm fine with it. At times I find the contract has a supplementary document with it called Schedule of Tasks, and this lays out all the tasks that the third party company is conducting for the sponsor. So I'm fine with that. I don't really have to see the SOPs of the third party. As long as the tasks are all laid out, detailed, in a document, a written document, then it should be fine. Thank you. Barbara, do you want to add anything?
Thank you, Adil.
Thank you.
For Barbara, what is the investigator's responsibility in overseeing vendors that investigator site is using, for example, for calibrating equipment? Or is this still ultimately a sponsor's responsibility?
I'll be quick with this. ICH E6R3. Section 3.6.6, the sponsor should provide information to the investigator on any service provider identified by the sponsor to undertake any activities under the responsibility of the investigator. The responsibility for such activities remains with the investigator. That makes it a little difficult, but yeah, so the sponsor should inform the investigator. The investigator has an obligation to oversee those tasks in the collection of data assigned to the investigator.
Thank you. And with 20 seconds left, I think I'll go to a short one maybe. And this one's for Jason. I want to give everybody enough time for each session. So Jason mentioned the UK clinical trials legislation. Is there any update on when this might be published?
I think I can hit the time limit. Sometime this year is the answer.
Perfect. Thank you. All right, I'm going to ask Jason to stay on the stage and invite the session 2 folks down. And thank you again to the session 1 speakers. All right, so our session 2 folks joining me on the stage are Jason, Jennifer, and Richard. All right, so maybe since Jason just responded to a question, I'll start with Rick, if you don't mind. So Rick, is there any tool, or could there be, where frequent findings are listed? This could be useful for risk assessment and focus metrics.
Yeah, good question. We do have a bond inspection metrics page. It's just on fda.gov. Just go search for it. Looks like it has metrics current as of fiscal year 22 right now. And it's kind of nice. It has an overall summary for each year, and then a split into 43 observation trends, split into IRBs, GLPs, CIs, and sponsors.
Thank you. Jennifer, I have a combination question. We had some that were somewhat similar, so I'm going to try to combine these. So you talked obviously a lot about CSIs and gave some examples. So how many CSIs did Health Canada do during the pandemic, and how many have they done since? And can you also comment on the frequency, or I guess maybe that question is about like a proposed proportion of CRIs that will be conducted? What percentage of sponsors, studies, or qualified investigators may receive such an inspection? And then there was also a question about whether sponsors or qualified investigators can make requests for CRIs, and if that may help them to avoid noncompliance, so more of like an educational aspect to an inspection.
So they're CRIs, Compliance Readiness Inspection. I'm not part of the crime unit.
My apologies. So
yeah, the answer is kind of combines all those, so that's why it's good to ask it as a combined question. In regards to the number of CRIs, percentage-wise of our total inspections, it's about 10%. It was higher during the pandemic because we were halting some of our other inspections. So it's a risk-based approach when we do a CRI, the decision to do it being based if it's a benefit to the regulated party that we're going to inspect, and if there's a likelihood of non-compliance. And we don't control the number of clinical trial applications that the Review Bureau is getting. So if they get a lot with a lot of new sponsors, new qualified investigator sponsors, then we would have based on our risk-based approach, we'd have a higher likelihood to be doing those, so our numbers could be higher, et cetera. But for now, the CRIs make up a small proportion of our total inspections and compliance verification activities that we conduct. And in regards to can we request, can a party request that? For sure, you can request a CRI. Proactive regulated parties are welcome. And we're happy that the introduction of these CRIs has been met with such enthusiasm and positive feedback. When we first started doing them, we were sending out surveys and seeing how the regulated parties were taking them. So we're happy to expand on them, as mentioned, into other areas beyond the COVID realm, because of it being developed during the pandemic. So I think that answered the frequency, numbers, percentages. Yes, questions?
Thank you. So Jason, back to you and back to monitoring, on-site monitoring. So, you gave a very full response in the previous session, but this questioner asked, specifically about ICH E6R3 supporting remote activities such as audits and SDVs. There was concern about weakening the sponsor's position of mandating on-site visits to investigate serious issues. That is, things like repeated non-compliances or serious breaches. So could you comment a little further on agency expectations with regards to sites allowing physical access to sponsor representatives to conduct these activities?
I think any site that fundamentally turns around and says you can't come, full stop, I think has probably got something that they're potentially trying to hide rather than something else. It's understanding and working with them, and as Barbara said earlier on, it's very much understanding as an organisation why they don't want you to come and whether or not that sounds reasonable. And potentially escalating that away from just the investigator's team. It might be the investigator and his team doesn't have the capacity to manage lots of on-site visits and audits and that kind of thing. And that's more of a resource issue. So then that's potentially up to Research Governance Office, R&D, whatever you want to call it, within the organisation, within the hospital, to see whether or not they can help support the investigator through. I don't believe that E6 weakens the position. I think if anything, it gives options, and I think options are important. The less people on the site that while they're doing the routine reviews using electronic health records and things, so much the better in some respects, because it allows other people to turn up and do the on-site bits that they do need to do. Like I said, I think it comes back to contracts. I think it comes back to understanding why that is. And ultimately, if you really can't get it to work and you really cannot get on site, then that's trying to work out what you do next, whether it's restricting their activities, speaking to your regulator, speaking to potentially to the ethics committee. I don't know. It depends on where you are in the world and how that functions.
Thank you. Next question is for Rick. What are the 2024 plans for FDA to complete GCP inspections of sponsors, CROs, and investigator sites, more specifically in India? The questioner also asked, for MHRA and Health Canada opinion. So if you folks have any responses to that, we'd be open to hearing it.
Yeah, sure. For FDA OBIMO, it's steady as she goes for India work. We're application driven over there. It's predominantly BEQ. Don't see a whole lot of sponsor clinical investigator sites over there, but yeah, we will continue our generous workload over there.
And any comment from Jason or Jennifer?
I need to say something similar, driven by need, really, and then we'll have our inspection program for bioequivalence, which will include sites in India.
Yeah, ditto with our expansion for bioequivalent studies.
Next question is for Jennifer. This is also kind of a combination question. So are CRI inspections yielding more compliant sites and therefore more compliant sponsors? And why are reports not generated for CRIs and why are reports not generated for CRIs and CAPAs required? And what action results from these CRIs?
Interesting question for if they're yielding more compliant sites. We're having an internal discussion on that of kind of what metrics to evaluate the effectiveness of a CRI. Could it be fewer observations, lower risks as compared to our regular inspections? Perhaps, as to say, it's still ongoing. We don't really have enough, I would say, data as well to kind of confirm that or deny that hypothesis. And then in regards to why we don't do reports, this is a no data collection type, no data review inspection. We're aiming to help the regulated party comply with the regulations, GCP and whatnot. It's a collaborative type approach. So sending them a report to have to respond to doesn't seem very collaborative. It's also more of a learning inspection. It's a compliance promotion aspect. But the goal is still the same. We want to ensure the regulated parties are better prepared to meet their requirements and likelihood of non-compliance. Although we don't formally request a CAPA, we still hope that they take the findings that we mentioned during the closing meeting and take action accordingly. And also they're free to take their own notes and write down the findings. We're not stopping them from that, even though we're only giving them verbally. And actions from CRIs, as mentioned, if we're finding a lot of findings and thinking there's a risk for non-compliances in the future, we can recommend a regular inspection be conducted in the future, and we'll add that to our risk-based site selection list.
Thank you. Next question's for Jason. This morning, the term regression was used in regard to novel clinical trial approaches post-pandemic. The questioner felt that was probably a fair assessment. Investigator oversight is key to a compliant trial and should be emphasized more so in R3, but decentralized models can make oversight and even documented involvement by a CI, PI a challenge. So can your agency speak to any challenges encountered with regards to investigator oversight and alternative models? And could this be behind any of that regression or hesitancy that you referred to?
I think the word I used was reticence, but regression probably works too. The investigators have a lot to deal with, and I think it comes back to an earlier question as well, which I think Adil answered about almost things being given to the investigator. I think that it comes down to working with the investigator to work out what will work for them in terms of providing tools, providing research nurse support, healthcare at home, whatever it might be, to enable that particular type of trial. We've seen a number of examples where investigators are sort of told, the sponsors provided a service, some support, whatever it is, and told the investigator that this is how it will be. Whereas there's no guarantee that will actually work with how that investigator wants to work and the processes that they have established. So these kind of trials, there's loads of moving parts, and we were talking about that earlier on. So if there's loads of moving parts, then just by adding more and more complexity when potentially the investigator doesn't need or want that, doesn't make life any easier for the investigators. So you can sort of see why potentially they might step away from doing some of those if they're being given more and more to do and less ability to keep a hand on what's actually happening. The more things are pushed away, do they still have the ability to understand what's happening? Are they totally reliant on the sponsor or totally reliant on another organisation to tell them that things are okay? Whereas previously they'd have it all under their roof.
Thank you. And I think that's time for session 2. So thank you again for your talks, and we really appreciate it. And I'll call up our session 3 folks next. So we've got Jen, Jennifer, and Mandy joining us. All right, so I'm going to start with a question for Jen from FDA. In what phase of a marketing application are FDA, or I guess the stage of review for a marketing application, are FDA inspections usually conducted?
That is a very good question. Thank you. FDA's mission, or CDER's mission, is to make sure we have safe and effective drugs available to the public, to American people. So we have review division, CDER. They review different aspects of the drug safety and efficacy, but are the data reliable, can be used to support the indication in the application. So that's our mission, is to make sure the study are conducted according to the investigational plan, and the data are reliable to be used. So to do this, we have GCP inspections. So we select a clinical investigator, sometimes use risk-based approach to sponsor and CRO inspections. So after application submitted, we select selections, we send out inspections, and we review the reports, and we send the recommendation back to the review division. That's after the application is submitted. However, during any time during the drug development phase, if we hear any complaints or any GCP concerns from any sources, FDA will send out inspectors for inspections.
Thank you, Jen.
Thank you.
Now this is for Jenna, and I apologize. Jennifer, but I know you like Jenna. With international privacy and data sharing concerns in mind, would it be prudent to ensure that trial participants are consenting to data sharing access to allow for potential RRAs in the future?
So thank you, first off, whoever submitted this question. The answer is yes, that would be very convenient. You, as Rachel Mead from MHRA mentioned in her presentation recorded earlier today, you should be prepared for a remote inspection at all times. And so we had a number of conversations in our feasibility discussions with clinical investigator sites, and they had a number of discussions with their ethics committees and data protection officers about the specific language that was existing in consent forms that were never designed for remote transfer of data, and that specifically define that subject records can be reviewed by FDA during an on-site inspection, but don't address electronic transfer of those records to participate in a remote regulatory assessment. So I think part of preparedness for the potential of an RRA coming down in the future could potentially include inclusion of language about remote regulatory assessments and electronic transfer of data that's required to participate in those in informed consent documents kind of going forward.
Thank you, Jenna. Next, and I forgot to point out that Mandy is sitting in for Rachel, who is our remote speaker. So we really appreciate your willingness to do so. So Mandy, this question's for you and for MHRA. So in order to achieve remote monitoring of study patient records, sites are giving access to electronic health records. In general, evaluating validation of these systems isn't feasible. So does MHRA generally accept these electronic health records as fit for purpose if they require unique credentials to log in? And is there a clear electronic signature or time date attributability?
So thank you for this question. We in the MHRA have actually released a position statement on electronic health records because we were finding issues on inspections of this move to electronic health records, but they hadn't really considered the GCP aspect of those. So a lot of electronic health records were scanned images, maybe in black and white, or half the page was missing and they weren't really in order. So we experienced issues on inspection. So of course we thought, well, this must be impacting monitoring and auditing as well. So we released a position statement on that, working within the NHS on what the expectations were in terms of this GCP also needs to be considered. That being said, the electronic health record is the investigator institution system, and they should already have mechanisms to sort of validate their own system. And we're not expecting you to go and validate their system for them and do an additional validation, but actually to go and do your own assessment, probably at site selection, to see what the system looks like and is it fit for purpose for what you need in order to conduct the trial. And if you do identify issues there, to make sure that there's workarounds around that. This is also covered in the ICH E6R3 update, making it really clear in terms of what are the investigators' computerized systems and responsibility of the investigator or institution versus what is the sponsor's responsibility. So that's been really clearly outlined in ICH E6R3 in the current draft. Thank you,
Mandy. The next question I have is for Jen and FDA. So have there been any regulatory actions taken as a result of negative RRA outcomes?
That's a good question. Yeah, thank you for the question. Actually, thank you for paying attention to my presentation, because I mentioned in the presentation that doesn't matter if it's inspection or RRA, as long as we have objectionable findings, observations, and then regulatory action will be taken. So yes, we have, but I cannot disclose the details because the RA results are not posted by FDA yet. So yes, we have.
Thank you. Next question is for Jenna. It's the questioner's understanding that when FDA collects, and you stated this in your talk, that when FDA collects documents from clinical sites, it's the questioner's understanding that when the FDA collects documents from clinical sites that they cannot be redacted. So why are documents shared for an RRA redacted?
Yeah, so I wanted to address this because I think this perhaps is maybe a common misunderstanding. So it's actually not true. A lot of times on our international inspections, the records that we collect are redacted in order for our clinical sites to be in compliance with their local laws. So we would not, as representatives of FDA, ever instruct you to do something knowingly that would violate your local law. We may not know always your local law, but commonly, we are told by our clinical investigator sites, I must redact this record as I provide it to you for an exhibit in order to be in compliance, not just in the EU, but also increasingly in other countries in the world, Australia, Japan, South Korea, just off the top of my head from recent experience. And then documents collected via an RRA, we do ask sites to consider redacting specifically because of the way that they are transferred to us electronically. So FDA doesn't have the capability of an in-house portal. We use a third-party service, which is box.com, encrypted service at this time for the collection of those electronic records. And there are inherent risks in the scanning and uploading of those documents that you don't have when you're being given a physical hard copy on site. And so we ask that those be redacted before they're submitted to us.
Thank you. Next question for Mandy is to discuss any process to share results of inspections or remote assessments with other regulatory agencies. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so as I alluded to in the presentation earlier, we share inspection findings where it's relevant to the other countries. So we do that as part of our collaboration, and that would include whether we've done a remote, on-site or hybrid inspection.
Thank you. A question for Jen. The questioner was interested in Health Canada and FDA's immediate response in adapting to COVID-19. So while Health Canada created a more focused approach and application of remote compliance assessment and inspections, FDA's RRA version didn't appear to be as targeted or focused. I think Jen used the term whenever when discussing FDA determining whether or not to conduct an RRA. So how can sponsors prepare to work with FDA on RRAs?
Thank you. This is a great question. I'd like to thank to the person who asked this question because, sorry, if I have caused any confusion. So in my presentation, I talk about when FDA may request RRA. The question is whenever, if RRA we believe is appropriate for GCP oversight. However, in my presentation, I did not talking about the scope and the focus of RRA. Yes, we agree with Health Canada that the RRA should be focused and should, if you agree with FDA to have a RRA, and we should be able to provide you the focus and the scope of the RRA and the schedule of meetings, the details, yeah, should be focused.
Thank you. And another question for Jenna. During RRAs or on-site inspections, does FDA obtain access to TMFs or electronic records without having to view them over the shoulder? If not, are there plans to make this access to electronic records a requirement?
So this is a recent change in our procedures. We were previously not able to have direct access to any electronic systems over the course of an inspection, but that has actually since changed. Specifically for BIMO inspections, we're able to obtain direct access provided we're given assurances that our access is read-only, and we're provided an assistant essentially to describe the layout and format of those records.
Thank you. And with time about to run out, I think I'm going to move on to session 4, and we're going to give them an opportunity to answer some questions. So thank you all very much. So I'd like to call up folks from session 4. We have Emily, Stephen, and Hocine joining us. Hello. Thanks. All right, so I'm going to start with a question for all 3 of our panelists. Is there a plan for creating a more collaborative culture between industry and the regulators? And since Emily is just to my right, I'll start with Emily.
Okay, great, thanks. I feel a little bad, like I hope this question came in before my slides showing all the ways that we're trying to collaborate. And I assume that they mean beyond this meeting here today, which I think is a great opportunity for industry and regulators to interact. But, you know, all kidding aside, to say that there's a plan for a more collaborative culture, I think we're already doing a lot of collaboration through this meeting, through other meetings that aren't just regulators, but obviously have industry involved as well. I did show a slide with all of the different programs CDER has, with opportunities for industry to come in, and it's not just sponsors, it's also patient advocates and other stakeholders. We really do want to hear from you, and I know that it's true for other regulators as well, that there's a lot of opportunities to engage in dialogue and collaborate so that we can help move things forward.
And if Stephen or Hocine has any comments, anything to add to that, you're welcome to.
Yeah, I think events like this are, a good example of driving collaboration. I think it's very much as well the cultural shift that we're just not here transmitting and you receiving, that we get that loop of challenge and question coming back to us and vice versa, so we can actually engage and discuss issues, initiatives, etc. And then also I think of from our perspective as well, and I guess from yours, of making sure we're engaging with the right people. It was a big thing when I was in industry of, commercially, are we speaking to the decision makers and making sure that how we're interacting is that the messaging is getting to the right people to help you to facilitate change, and also to make sure that we're receiving the messages from you that will then facilitate change with the way that we work. So there's plenty of opportunities and initiatives, and I think we just need to get that sort of cultural trust and collaboration part moving forward, and then I think a lot of it will sort itself out.
Thank you. I agree with Emily and Steve. So collaboration is fundamental, of course, and in Health Canada, this is what we do, and if there is a room for improvement, of course, we can improve. Just to give you an example, all of our guidance and policies, whether they are clinical trial or any other health matter like GMP or cannabis or anything else, we do it in a consultation mode. So we engage our stakeholders, we share with them the draft, we collect comment, we address all of them, we meet with them face to face, like we are doing everything that we can do to increase collaboration and to be at least meet the expectation of the industry. So at this moment, I can say that we're happy with the level of collaboration, but if there is a room to improve, why not? Thank you.
Thank you. Next question is for Stephen. The questioner asked, what is upstream intervention at MHRA?
So it's an intervention that's upstream. So
very much clearer.
Yeah. So I guess if we think about interactions with the site or an organisation in isolation, we have an inspection, and that's when we see you and you see us. And then the sort of classic interaction would be we do an inspection, we may or may not cite issues, and then the site goes away, fixes it, and then we come back again and we find something else, and then we go away and we come back again. So the way we look at the upstream intervention is can we help and improve compliance by the way we engage before that inspection cycle. So for instance, an event like this or stakeholder groups. So one thing that we're looking at with our strategy is that, okay, if we do an event like this or a specific event, how effective is the messaging? Is it getting to the right people? Are we saying the right things to help improve compliance, or are we just transmitting what we want? And so we need to work out how we can measure the effectiveness of those engagements, and also looking at other routes to try and help and improve compliance, whether it's from blogs on the internet or working with specific organisations or trade bodies that may have an influence over a sector with training or education, just so that we can try and use all of the tools and levers that we've got that can help improve compliance without it just being an inspection and a report, in that there may be other routes of how we can communicate a message that will help compliance improve over time with organisations.
Thank you, Stephen. Hocine, the questioner asked, is there an updated timeline for the regulatory modernization of Division 5 regulations?
Yes, there's tentative timelines. We're hoping that by early 2026, the new regulation will be coming into force. However, this can change because they're not firm yet, but at worst could be spring or fall 2026. Thank you.
And additionally, Hocine, the questioner asked about GUI 0100 and whether it was expected to be updated with the ICHR3 updates.
Absolutely. All of our guidance document, including Guide 100, will be updated based on new regulation or with the publication and the adoption of the ICH E6 R3. And of course, we will do it in a collaboration way with the industry and with the I'm pretty sure for the ICH E6 R3, there will be a training session in Canada to our stakeholders. And also with the new regulation, at least 6 months before coming into force, we will start training, meeting with industry, doing all of this compliance promotion to make sure that they understand the new requirement, but also to help them comply quickly and also help our industry to build that relationship to make sure that the new regulation will be successful. Thank you.
Thank you. From our registrants, we did get a few questions that I noticed earlier this morning about whistleblower protections. I will open that up to Stephen in a second, but I just want to say, I'm a team leader in our compliance oversight branch, so we field a lot of, we call them complaints or referrals from a variety of sources, and we handle a lot of the directed and for cause inspections. I think there's a different understanding of what a whistleblower is in a lot of areas of the world. I think what I'll say is for FDA, I would just direct anyone who has questions about whistleblowers and whistleblower protections to look at our website for the Department of HHS, so Health and Human Services. In particular, Office of the Inspector General has some good information on definitions for what a whistleblower is and what the types of protections for whistleblowers exist. So if there is interest in that, you can look to that website for more information. But I'd love to open it up to Stephen or Hocine if they have any other additional comments about whistleblowers.
Yeah, I mean, we've got a very similar position that we'd say, please look at our website because there are ways people can contact the agency with complaints or blowing the whistle, and there are protections that are in place. So certainly at the MHRA, if we do receive anything like that, there are SOPs and there's ways of working that will protect the identity of whoever's approached us with information. And we have some very strict guidance that we need to follow, which takes it all the way through if we do need to do an inspection of just how that's managed to protect any sources of information. And I think equally the wider piece on this is just, things go wrong or things don't quite go according to plan. And it just comes back to this, how do we communicate between ourselves from an organisational point of view as well. So obviously in the UK, we've got serious breach reporting systems for clinical trials where it's laid down in our regulations with definitions of when a sponsor should contact us and then discuss it. And I think the important thing here is that it's not just a kind of linear thing that happens, that something goes wrong, you tell us, and then we decide what we're going to do to you. There's an awful lot of work that say Mandy's team will put in when we get these reports from organisations. We'll then work with the company. Okay, there may be some regulatory issues, but for example, if there's a problem with an IMP, the consideration will still be the participant or the patient of what the impact is on them and how the best way to manage that care is, while still maintaining the regulatory oversight of it. So this isn't a kind of policing action that happens. It's just identifying issues and then working out how we protect the patients and also make sure that we maintain the regulatory oversight and making sure that everything's reliable and everything's in order. So I think that's an important thing as well. We're not talking about telling tales and then teacher coming and disciplining. It's about, yes, it's gone wrong, how do we fix it? And then, yes, how do we stop it happening again? So I think that's a really important message when we go back to the whole culture and collaboration piece as well.
Thank you.
Yeah, nothing to add. I think we are aligned with the MHRA and the FDA. well covered. Thank you.
And I think that's it for session 4. Thank you very much. Finally, to wrap this up, keeping you all from wherever you're headed next, is session 5. I'd like to invite Mandy, Lakeisha, and Reza up. So first question will go to Lakeisha. Does FDA share full inspection reports, or are the reports redacted before being shared with MHRA or Health Canada?
Yeah, great question. So we do share our inspection reports and other documents with MHRA and Health Canada. Within CDER, they are sent for clearance first. Sometimes they are redacted depending on what's in the report, but the full inspection report is sent for clearance before it's shared. So sometimes, yes, it is redacted.
Thank you, Lakeisha. And Reza, what's been the most significant impact of the trilateral relationship?
The most significant impact of the trilateral relationship is to align our efforts by working together towards achieving our common objective, is to ensure participant safety and integrity of the data generated during the clinical trial. And also, this is collaboration is extremely cost effective too.
Very much. Agreed. Mandy, will there be more harmonized guidance coming from the 3 agencies?
Okay, great question again. So one big piece of harmonized guidance that's coming out, which all 3 agencies are part of, is the ICH E6R3 update. And I know that just doesn't just involve us, but all the ICH regions in that. But this is like an aim and a goal going forward in terms of which areas can we harmonize more on. And even when we do produce guidance, and even if it is individually, you know, we do talk to each other. We do get a feel for what's your current thinking on this. And we're pretty much aligned on that already. So if you think of the big themes in each of our guidances, the big themes are very much aligned, and they all come back to data integrity and protecting the participants and public health.
Thank you. Lakeisha, you're up next. You mentioned FDA's authority to share documents comes from 21 CFR 20.89. Could you go over any differences between CFR and MOUs and CAs and CCs? And maybe remind everybody what some of those mean.
Okay, sure, yeah. So the CFR, which is the Code of Federal Regulation, which I did mention in my presentation, is the statute that gives up federal agencies the authority to do certain things, which we must follow. Within the CFR, as I mentioned, there is a statement that says there must be a written agreement in place for FDA to share information, and that's where the CA, which is the cooperative arrangement, comes in. The CA within the FDA is the cooperative agreement that we use to share information. The cooperative arrangement is also sometimes called an MOU, so there are other names for it, but the big point of it is that it's a written understanding that FDA can establish with one or more foreign government or international partner that describes the willingness and good faith of intentions of FDA and its counterparts to engage in cooperative activities. Now, with that being said, the CC that you mentioned, which is called the confidentiality commitment, it is a document that sets the legal framework for FDA to share certain kinds of non-public information with FDA counterparts in foreign countries. So although we may have a corporate arrangement with the company, with MHRA and Health Canada, we also have to have a CC, which is a confidentiality commitment in place to share documents.
Thank you. Mandy, you're up next. With all the sharing and the love you referred to between the agencies, do you also envision there will be more joint inspections going forward?
Yes, so I certainly hope so. That is the aim. I think we've mentioned it in the presentation already of how can we utilize our experience and our resource more effectively, how can we have that wider reach. So that's definitely the direction of travel and an area that we're exploring. And you saw on the graph that Reza presented of how many we did pre-pandemic, and then of course we had that big blip, if we're going to go with the Avengers theme that happened. And now it's about let's ramp that back up and see how we can move forward with joint inspections again.
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Lakeisha and ask if FDA goes to a CRO to inspect the TMF for an NDA pre-approval inspection. Man, we love our acronyms, don't we? And the CRO is located in the UK. Will MHRA be notified? If yes, is there a potential that MHRA and FDA inspectors show up together during the inspection?
Thank you, Ryan, for that question. The short answer is yes. So within the Office of Regulatory Affairs, when we conduct inspections in foreign countries, they do notify the authority within that country as a courtesy, just to inform them that we will be there. It's typically we try to give at least 30 days, but of course with the foreign travel planning, sometimes that can change. But overall, yes, we do try to give at least a 30-day notice. And sometimes it depends on the type of inspection. If it's maybe a triggered or a for-cause inspection for FDA, the other foreign country, they may show up and observe with us. But if it's a routine inspection, sometimes they will, sometimes they may not. But the short answer is yes, we do notify them in advance that FDA will be within their country.
Thank you very much. Back to Mandy. Is the collaboration between the agencies limited to exchange of inspection results, or do the agencies rely on each other's results and take that into consideration to avoid duplication?
Okay, so that is a future goal to see what we can do in terms of joint inspections, as well as if we've already conducted an inspection of that marketing authorization application, how that can be used by the other agencies within the collaboration, and if it meets a certain requirements. That's an area of work to explore. But in the case study that I presented yesterday, that was an example of where the inspection outcome was shared with other regulatory agencies within this collaboration, and then they were able to use that to then inform what they needed to do next. So rather than actually repeating and starting from scratch, they had some information of areas already covered, and they could explore other areas. For example, go to maybe foreign sites that we weren't able to inspect to look at the data further.
Fantastic. Reza, what criteria or considerations does Health Canada utilize when they're selecting submissions for a joint inspection? Maybe this is something that's been discussed among the three agencies, yeah.
Right. So the main criteria we consider for conducting joint inspection is timing. It's in order for Health Canada to inspect, we need to have that CTA, that submission received by Health Canada. So timing is the main criteria. If we have that CTA too, then if it's a common interest for us too, then we are interested to conduct joint inspection. And if we don't have that CTA and there is an opportunity to do collaborative inspection, it falls into the other criteria that I spoke during my presentation, is observational. So we try to observe those inspections.
Great. Final question, and this again is more sharing love. So this is kind of open to anyone, but maybe I'll start with Mandy since she's to my direct right. Do you foresee engaging other agencies, for example, EMA, PMDA, Pan-African Agency, in any collaborations?
Okay, I'll start and then I'll pass on to my colleagues to answer, because you know, there are different collaborations within each agency, but we're also looking at some of the more sort of bigger collaborations that we have. So one of the collaborations that we do have is PICS, and we're creating an expert circle for GCP within that. And there's also one for pharmacovigilance. So for GCP, that means we're really concentrating on inspectors and inspectors training and guidance and harmonization. So that's a very new area that's being explored specifically for inspections. So there's PICS, and then within the MHRA, there are other collaborations as well. We have the Access and Project Orbis, so we're looking into those areas too. So we continue to collaborate with other agencies going forward. So I will pass over to Lakeisha.
Thanks, Mandy, and great question. Within FDA, there are other collaborations, but specifically within OSI, we do have a collaboration with EMA and PMDA. It's very similar to our MHRA and Health Canada collaboration, where we meet bi-monthly to discuss common applications. That started in 2009. The goal, and I think Mandy kind of alluded to this in her presentation, is to invite other agencies into the collaboration, because it's always better for us to do more. You can do more with less. So that's the goal. But we already have collaborations in OSI with EMA and PMDA. Thank you.
Thank you. So obviously, of course, our primary collaboration is with US FDA and MHRA. But beside that, we welcome any other collaboration which can enhance our ability to safeguard our mandate is to protect Canadians. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Session 5 completed. All right.